Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, best-selling author of the book, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. Today's guest is Dr. Jaquish, or Dr. J. I asked him how to pronounce his surname at the start because I've heard it pronounced in several different ways, and he said, just call me Dr. J. So Dr. J, he is the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, So is Cardio, and There's a Better Way to Have the Body You Want. Today's episode was a very enjoyable conversation. Since I read his book, I wanted to pick his brain on a few things because there's a lot of breakdown of different misconceptions, different myths, different potential ways to look at training and nutrition that might be a better fit for you. And one of the things that I try and do with this podcast is bring you lots of different ideas so that you can find what's going to be the best fit for you, whether it comes to the diet you follow or the training program you're on. So in today's episode, we talk a lot about where weights went wrong. So the opposite way of training, or Dr. J's philosophy for training, which is variable resistance training, aka his X3 program, and how that works. And we dive into the falsehood of fitness. So cardio being a great way to lose weight, or calorie restriction is the only way that you can lose body fat, and some of the ways to navigate through the misconceptions online and how to find what's going to be a good fit for you. We also, towards the latter part of today's episode, talk about the philosophy of 1 meal a day eating. So I know some of you, and not something I've touched on previously, I think Ori Hofmeckler, way back in 2017 or 2016 was the last time I touched on this philosophy, the author of the book, The Warrior Diet. So we get into that about how you could potentially transition to 1 meal a day if that's something you think would be a good fit for you. So without further ado, here is today's podcast episode with my guest, Dr. J, on why cardio does not work for fat loss, the reason weightlifting is a waste of time, and the benefits of variable resistance training. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Dr. Jaquish. Dr. Jaquish, PhD, is the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, So is Cardio, and There's a Better Way to Have the Body You Want. He has spent years researching and developing improved approaches to health. He is the inventor of the most effective bone density building medical technology, which is now partnered with Tony Robbins and OsteoStrong for rapid clinic deployment. Inventor of X3, a technology that is proven to develop muscle much faster than conventional weightlifting, all with the lowest risk of joint injury. His methods are used in training the world's most elite athletes and associations such as the entire Miami Heat organization, various NFL and NBA players, as well as Olympians. I'm looking forward to talking all things fitness, training, and diet in today's episode. Dr. Jaquish, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into your book, which again, what I love about the opportunity to speak with people like you is you come at it from a very different area and you break down a lot of the myths and misconceptions that are out there around training and around nutrition. But before we do that, talk to us a little bit about your backstory. I know you finished your PhD in 2012 and you have kind of an interesting story about getting to the best shape of your life before 40. So maybe jump us forward there and talk us what kind of led you on your current path now.
Yeah, well, actually, I was in lousy shape before I turned 40. After I turned 40, I became in great shape. But so I started focusing on studying bone density because my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis. I wanted to treat that osteoporosis. She was unwilling to take any medication, so I wanted to come up with a physical medicine device that would trigger bone growth. I knew that bone loss is really a disuse dysfunction as opposed to like a pathogen, right? I mean, it's not a cold, it's not the flu. So I just wanted something that she could do that would treat it as opposed to a pill she could take. And I found my method was to find the population that had the highest bone density. And I did. It was very easy to find them. They were gymnasts. So like there was so much research about gymnastics and how they absorb powerful loads, but only in very specific positions. So I didn't exactly know what to do next other than develop medical devices that placed the proper amount of force on the human body. Then when doing the trials for those, did them in London, University of East London, and there was a hospital nearby that the tests were conducted at. I went to observe and make sure that the device was being used correctly. Because, you never know when somebody's running a study, the person who ends up doing the work could be somebody who didn't really pay attention to the documentation, and they could use it wrong, and then it's certainly not going to work. So the physicians would ask me, gosh, these loads that you're putting through these postmenopausal females are 6, 7, 8 times their body weight. And yeah, they are. And it's just in very specific impact-ready positions that they absorb those loads. And then they said, what does the average person lift at the gym? And I said, next to nothing. Like generally the difference between beginning athletes and like elite athletes is 1.3 to 1.53 multiples of body weight, where we're using seven multiples of body weight, for example. So it was a very interesting experience. And then realizing once reviewing the publication that people were able in very specific impact ready positions to hold 7-fold what they could hold. It's actually a little more than 7-fold what they can hold in the weaker positions. I thought weightlifting doesn't make any sense because it's the same weight at the bottom and at the top. What we need is a weight that drastically changes so that it matches what our capacity is. So lower weight at the bottom, which makes it easier on joints, and a higher weight at the top when the muscle is capable of so much more force. You get a deeper level of fatigue, and then you get a more profound growth stimulus. So then I did a literature review while I was doing the sort of prototyping of the device, and thought I knew what I wanted. And I changed my mind a couple of times. There were some different versions of things, but ultimately landed on the same conceptual device that I had originally thought of, like the day I made this observation. And it really just has to do with delivering incredible forces where you're powerful, and then dissipating those forces where the joint is at risk of injury, because you're not hardly engaging any muscle there anyway. Most people are just bouncing off their tendons and ligaments and screwing themselves up, creating chronic injury. Most of the things I see in weightlifting now that I know what I know are just idiotic. Just completely, they're not just ineffective, they're counterproductive. Yeah, after making all these observations, then I launched the product. I did a very soft launch on Dave Asprey's podcast, the Bulletproof podcast. I'm sure you have some crossover into that audience. Yeah, after it was moving, I realized very quickly, and I was warned about this because my original idea, like I already had the bone density medical device business, and that was going well. And I suppose I could have just sat on a beach with a drink, and just because I had a royalty deal, and do a lecture every couple of months somewhere. This is, of course, before coronavirus, and then just enjoy myself. But I'm not really wired like that. I saw a task. I just can't say no. Like when somebody puts a challenge in front of me, I have to do it. I was warned by a bunch of companies. I wanted to originally license the technology and the patents of X3, so the new muscle building product. I wanted to license it to other manufacturers, and they're like, "Wait a minute, you're going to make a scientific presentation to the fitness audience?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my plan." And they're like, no. Fitness people are absolutely stupid. Like, they're the dumbest. They're the lowest common denominator in society. And, I thought about it. Okay, like you go after scuba divers and golfers, and they may have a little more intelligence and wealth than the typical $9 a month gym guy. But I said, they can't be that stupid. I was wrong. They are that stupid.
When you say fitness industry, are you talking people that are looking to get in shape, or people that are at the top end?
Fitness fans.
Okay.
Yeah. It just blew my mind. And look at where the fitness information is at its greatest volume. YouTube and Instagram, video and pictures. That's what these people can absorb. They can't read. So, or at least it's too hard for them. So I was so disappointed with the fitness audience, stupid comments and just nonsensical, not understanding basic physiology and claiming to be an expert was like what I saw like hundreds of times a day. So I pivoted to busy executives, busy professionals that really just wanted the optimized answer. And then the company completely took off. So we just went after a smarter customer. And that was a great move, changed absolutely everything. And now professional athletes and professional teams like the Miami Heat, bunch of guys in the NFL, about 15 guys in the NFL, more NBA guys, Olympic athletes, Swedish soccer. I won't remember everything, but quite a few people in bodybuilding actually have caught on. But of course, these people have like coaches, and I think some of the people who are incapable of reading science, once they see like professional athletes use it, then it's a different story. It's like, okay, I don't understand any of that science stuff. But, I understand if, some great quarterback who may be called the greatest one of all time uses it, well, maybe it could.
Do you think, Dr. J, just out of curiosity, is it the science aspect of it? Because I've read through your book and it's backed up, and in terms of biomechanics 101 and physiology 101, I'm like, it makes perfect sense that you don't load through the bottom of tendons, you load through the top. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Do you think that the reason that the fitness industry or people within, again, I'm putting don't mean to tar everybody with the same brush. I think a lot of coaches would have the open mind that certain things work for certain people and it's about finding the best fit for the individual. But do you think that it's because of the science that was stopping people adopting it and they had to go the social proof of professional athletes using it? Or what do you think was the barrier initially when you went that route and then pivoted?
Well, it's interesting. I think they go by social proof. Like, really unintelligent people are lemmings. They just go in whatever direction everybody else is going. Look at politics. Like, how has the world changed in the last 10 years? And it's just kind of a lemming following mentality. And most people just are followers. I do think, let me give you an example that I don't have a bias in. Cardiovascular exercise. There's 40 years of evidence that show cardiovascular exercise chronically upregulates cortisol, which gets rid of muscle mass and protects the body fat you have so you stay as fat as possible, as long as possible, because it's trying to turn you into an endurance machine. You need to have a lot of extra fuel to go these great distances, and having muscle exist is just burning extra fuel for nothing. Because, like a muscle is an engine at idle, even when you're resting. So if you train for great cardiovascular endurance, you're just getting rid of muscle as quickly as possible. 40 years of research on that. And most sports scientists you would ask, even 40 years ago, they'd be like, yeah, sustained cardio is like terrible for weight loss. But that's not where the industry even is today. Like right now, like you walk into a gym and some trainer will say the cardio is for weight loss and the weights are for muscle. Like, my attitude is there's no such thing as cardio. Like, it's just shitty, ineffective strength training. You're just contracting muscles, but you're not stimulating any growth, and you actually get more of a cardiovascular health effect from doing strength training. And I cite a meta-analysis with more than 100 references in it that says that, and I cite that in the book. So, I'm not in the cardio business. I'm not even competing with the cardio business. It's just the science is not easy to absorb. So I suppose 40 years can go by where the obvious is ignored by an industry full of very unintelligent people.
I'm going to definitely double back into kind of the cardio and where weights went wrong, because I think that's just a fascinating aspect to come at, just a kind of an angle that I haven't previously covered on the podcast. But I'm just curious for you, Dr. J, from your, just to kind of get a grasp of the timeline, because you mentioned at the top of the podcast that you were in lousy shape before 440 and you're in tremendous shape now and have been for a while. Did that timeline overlap with the creation of X3, or what was the actual step-by-step process.
X3 was the only difference. I was lifting hard up until I turned 40. And I probably put on like 10 or 15 pounds of muscle in like 20 years of lifting. I didn't get much out of it. And I was always kind of a thin kind of sprinter type. I played outside center in rugby. I know I'm an American that plays rugby. Yeah, I just didn't get much out of it. And for a while I was thinking, I guess I'm just not supposed to be a big guy. Like, and I put on a little bit of fat. I was like 16% body fat when I started this adventure, which is, I mean, there's some people who are proud of 16%. I think 16% is high. Like, nobody should be there. You should be lower.
Relative to the person, it varies. For me, you, that's high. For somebody else,
sure.
It's the target. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for like, I always saw myself as like I played on a rugby team after I graduated. It was a club team that traveled all over to, sort of like semi-pro, because we for a brief period of time did have a professional rugby league in the States, but we no longer do. So I was playing for one of those sort of junior teams, and I played on a team where everybody was Tongan or Samoan. And I definitely felt like the guys that worked hard enough, like some were leaner than others, but like everybody was getting stronger except me. And these guys were born to play rugby. I mean, look at Tongan and Samoan history with rugby. Like, they're great. And I just thought, like, it was like I tied my shoelaces together before every game. Like, these guys are just outclassing me because they're just strong. And you don't play rugby forever. So I didn't. I went into other stuff, but I always kept thinking, like, what am I missing here? Like, I don't think I'm just a person who can't put on muscle. I think I just haven't figured out how to do it right. And I would read, there was a few books I read that were supposed to be the most scientific books about weightlifting. There was no science in there at all. It was just like, here's what so-and-so does. We drew his blood. Like, okay, so you drew his blood. Did it tell you anything? Like, that doesn't make it scientific. So, I saw a lot of just nonsense and no real process where somebody looked at the existing clinical literature. And also, I want to point out, everything I say is backed up by somebody else's research, not just mine. So that's a big difference. There's 16 studies that I did not write.
When it comes to weight training in particular, and I do want to kind of pick your brain on cardio as well, and I know because of X3, and we'll go through this in more detail as we go along, but what was the thing you wish you had known when it comes to weight training? Because you obviously spent years lifting, getting stronger for rugby, for body composition to look better, all of these things that we lift weights for. What was the one or two things that you wish you had known about weightlifting back when you started, or back when you were potentially pushing it the most, or being the most consistent with your gym-based program or training program? What was kind of the main one or two things that you wish you had known back then that you know now?
Just the level of variance that we have in our output capacity. And that's the main point of that book. And the book talks about the creation of the product and how I addressed these things so we could make it accessible. The problem is variable resistance is not really accessible unless you have a gym that allows like chains and bands, and still it's not the right ratio, and you don't know the ratio that you're at. You're kind of flying blind. When I first saw, and this was years before I thought about, like, I was working on the bone density project, and I saw people training with chains. And I said, you know what? That makes sense. Now, the gym I was going to at the time didn't have that, so I couldn't really do much about it. But we all know that, like, when we do a push-up, the top of the push-up is easy. The bottom of the push-up is the hard part. So I always had this idea, like, it doesn't really make sense if there's a hard part, there's a hard part in one place and it's easy. Like, well, why don't we make it so that everything's hard? Why don't we change the loading? So I had that thought, but not more than like a minute. And then after doing the literature review, because when I had my bone density data, I was like the only one in the world that had data that showed just how dramatic the difference was between impact ready range and weak range. So I had to really focus on what that data told me. And then any other idea I had of variable resistance before that was like, okay, everything that everyone's done with variable resistance is totally not even scratching the surface of what we could really do. And that's why when I do a chest press, I hold 100 pounds at the bottom, 300 pounds in the middle, and 540 pounds at the top, which is like, 230 kilos, I think.
It's a lot.
No. Yeah, a lot. Yeah. It's like 230 kilos. So that's what I'm dealing with in a chest press for over 20 repetitions. So I'm really like tricking my body into lifting much heavier, which of course stimulates testosterone receptors. So like a lot of people, like there's people who even take performance enhancing drugs and they don't train heavy. Are they ever going to grow? They won't, because they don't have the receptors that are willing to accept that testosterone. And I cover that in the book too. Like there's no getting away from heavy. There are just better strategies to go heavy.
Yeah, that's what I love about the method. I think it's as you said, it's you're working through the difficulty, and it makes sense that you're going to be the strongest at the top, so you're going to be able to hold a different resistance level at that top. I've got a kind of a two-part question, but I want you to kind of just for the first to explain in your words, just because I know there's some people who are listening, and again, I'm aware of my background, a little bit of personal knowledge with this one. Variable resistance. Can you explain that kind of simply? And then I've got a follow-up question on kind of the creation of X3 and what led you to that. But just in your own words, Dr. J, what would you and how would you explain variable resistance to people?
A resistance that changes in accordance with your force output capacity. I guess that wasn't less complicated, was it?
Again, for people listening, a breakdown, it's that you're hitting a different load based on the part of the movement. And I think the injury prevention aspect, what I took away from the book for sure was that when you're not loading so much through the bottom when you're at the highest risk of injury, or certain parts of the movement that's at the highest risk of injury, it makes sense that your risk of hurting yourself goes down drastically. Like it's the same, I've seen it, Dr. J, of people doing these ridiculously crazy form with certain movements in the gym, and you're like, you are going to hurt yourself. And with this cuts it out. It's kind of the same as people who work with, slow tempo resistance training, even though they have the disadvantage of not being able to go as heavy. But just with that variable resistance, to kind of paint a picture in people's eyes before I ask the next question, when you were creating it, I'm really curious, because this isn't something that if I may have missed it when I was reading through the book, but when you were creating it, I assume that X3 didn't just go from a concept and idea to end product. Did you trial and test a few training methods in the gym yourself or workouts yourself before you actually got to the final product of X3? And the reason I ask that is for people that want to experiment with some form of variable resistance in their own training to see what it's like, and then potentially move on to X3. What would that look like, or what did that look like for you, assuming that it wasn't straight concept idea to finished product? Did you test it in terms of with barbells, with dumbbells, with bands, with you mentioned chains earlier? What did that look like?
You're not going to like my answer. I did everything on paper by finding multiple sources that said, in fact, the name X3 is because there's a Cornell study that shows that athletes who use variable resistance had 3 times the strength gains that people lifting standard weights did. And they were all randomly sampled out of strength athletics at Cornell University. That's why I called it X3. I did the whole thing mathematically. I didn't experiment at all.
It worked though. So there's no way to dislike the answer when it's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's gyms with chains and stuff, and yeah, could I have moved to Ohio to hang out with the guys at Westside Barbell for 6 months? I mean, maybe, because they were the ones who were really pushing variable resistance, but I felt like it wasn't very applicable to what I had in mind, because they had a very complex sort of approach to it that I didn't think had a scientific process behind it, but it was obviously working for them, because the guys who were training there were like breaking every world record. I think they broke like 400 world records out of that gym.
Yeah, let's pivot out of variable resistance and training. I want to go back and double back on cardio. And there's a chapter, probably my favorite chapter in the book, is the falsehoods of fitness. I think there's, again, I'm a sucker for myths and misconceptions and breakdowns, but there's a few in there on cardio. Talk about the falsehood of fitness and cardio being great for weight loss. You talked about it earlier about the cortisol. Just to expand on it for people, because there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who will think weight training good, resistance training good, cardio better for fat loss. Break that down for us a little bit.
Yeah, it's never been a less true statement. Cardio, like you're trying. So you don't talk to your central nervous system. You don't stand in the mirror and say, "Hey, central nervous system, I could stand to lose 20 pounds because I look awful." Like, the only way to communicate with your central nervous system is you create an environment where a change can happen, and that change is going to give you what you want. So let's use an automotive example. You can have a Prius or a Formula One car. Now, when you strength train, you're trying to be a Formula One car. Huge engine, very powerful engine. Bigger and thicker tendons and ligaments. You know, if you put a Formula One engine in that Prius, you blow the wheels right off it. The thing would just come apart, because it's not meant to handle that kind of power, which is why you have neural inhibition, which won't let you grow muscle that'll damage your tendons and ligaments. It all grows together. When you do cardio, you lose bone density, even when you run. Like, that's a big myth, that people who do a lot of running have higher bone density. No, they don't. They have lower. I mean, sprinters have higher bone density, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about cardio. If you're trying to be an efficient distance machine, your body will secrete the hormones that'll make that happen. But I promise you, it's not going to give you what you want. It's going to maintain body fat. It's going to get rid of muscle, which is, distance runners are regularly referred to as skinny fat. Like, they've lost a lot of muscle, but they're still not like lean people. Look at a sprinter. Sprinters have all visible abs. Why don't marathon runners? And then the evidence of the sky high cortisol, and just look at the body composition. There's data on this. So I'm not just speaking anecdotally. Like what is the body composition of the average sprinter? What is the body composition of the average marathoner? Well, the average marathoner is really not in that great a shape. Also has far more C-reactive protein because of the chronic damage that they're doing to joints. And the body has to deal with that. And they're usually at such a low calorie intake based on what they do. I know, somebody may say, well, I have a whole bunch of calories, so that makes up for it. No, it really doesn't. Because you're processing calories to attenuate damage, not to develop anything. So, like muscle damage is another big myth that I point out in the book. If you damage a muscle while you train, like the idea, when I was in high school, it's like you have micro tears in the muscle, and then when they heal, the muscle becomes bigger. Totally untrue. In fact, if you have micro tears in the muscle, your body will use its protein synthesis process to fix the damage, and you will not get stronger. So what you want to do is fully exhaust the muscle without damaging it, and then you get the maximum amount of growth. And you do that by offloading the weaker range where the damage happens. And that's exactly what X3 is.
Do you find personally, or with people that work on X3, because you're working not to exhausting without damage, would they still have the same level of, say, delayed onset muscle soreness, or is that something that goes away, or what does that look like for people?
Say that again.
So the reason I ask is I'm curious about when you do traditional style resistance training, which is kind of what has been my bread and butter, even though I'm open to lots of different training methodologies. But
sure,
when you kind of do resistance training first, especially new movement patterns, like you get really sore, like that delayed onset muscle soreness, where like 2 days later, you're just like, oh my God, you can barely sit down. You know, you need that.
Never happens at X3. You're never sore.
And is that because of that exhausting without the damage? Is that the reason? And not loading through the...
Exactly. Yeah, the soreness is not your body growing. The soreness is just damage. And your body has to repair the damage. Yeah. The last 60 pounds of muscle I have gained. So just, round that to 30 kilos. It's 30 plus, but who's counting?
What's a couple of pounds between friends? We're good.
Right. Yeah. So if you think about that, like I have not been sore one time. Not after one workout. In fact, I could go out and play like golf after a workout, which nobody can say that about weights. Like you have the coordination of an 8-year-old after a weight workout. Try shooting basketball. You know what I mean? Like you're sore. There's, like everything is just kind of irritated. It's awful. But this, not this.
Yeah, I think that you break that down really well in that falsehood about muscle damage being required for growth. Like something I've said on this podcast is muscle soreness doesn't equal, muscle growth. I'm like, if that was the case, marathon runners would have legs like, a 30-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm like, that's muscle soreness doesn't equal growth. But that ties in with another part, because I think these may be connected in the session, which jumped out at me just because there was definitely a gap in my knowledge on this. Talk about muscle confusion theory, which is something that I had been kind of a long-term subscriber to, partly because I never really saw any contradictory evidence, but I know you talk about this and it's kind of opened my mind to it. Talk about what muscle confusion theory is and then your falsehood around it.
Okay, so the idea was, and I blame Arnold Schwarzenegger for this, because I think he was the first one to talk about how you need to change your workout all the time because your body gets used to one type of workout. So you need to do a totally different type of workout to exhaust the muscle because and this is his words, you shock the muscle into growing. It's an interesting theory. It's been proven completely untrue in every test. People who have the same workout year after year, they grow more.
Does anything change within that workout?
So the confusing part of this is when you change up your workout completely, you get sore. Because before they thought getting sore was how you stimulated growth. And as soon as you stop getting sore, it was like, oh, well, we got to do something different now because we need to be sore. Totally wrong. It just puts growth at a halt. So, and coincidentally, now the American College of Sports Medicine has a position statement, which is a strong level of evidence. It's like a meta-analysis where they're trying to come to something very conclusionary, where they're saying like, don't engage in muscle confusion. Like it doesn't work. That's kind of they don't give the conjecture. Like it was an interesting idea. I mean, interesting has nothing to do with it. It's just wrong. And a lot of people spun their wheels for a lot of years getting caught up in that.
It's an easy one to get caught up in for sure, though, because it as you said, without...
It sounds right.
It sounds right without the evidence to support it. It sounds in theory, but without evidence, it's not.
Right.
What about calorie restriction then? This is... I know we have kind of similar schools of thought on this, but I want to kind of pick your brain that you say, and I know you talk about this in the book, and I've heard you on other podcasts, that calories matter, but not as much as we think. And particularly when it comes to trying to lose body fat. Talk about your thoughts on calorie restriction and calories in general and food and the nutrition side of fat loss in particular, as opposed to even muscle building.
So ultimately, calorie restriction, yes, that works if you want to lose body fat. However, it alone is not the most powerful method. Like I would say intermittent fasting is. Now, I don't know why there are some people on the internet who are like all about intermittent fasting, and they just think calorie restriction is stupid, or for some reason, I think it's because everybody can hide behind their computer. People are mean on the internet, and it's not like, well, there's conflicting research, but there might be merit in both ideas. That's what human beings would say to each other in person. But instead, somebody hears an idea that's different than theirs, and it's like, you should kill yourself. Like, okay.
Yeah, I've been on the receiving side.
Internet. Yeah, like we really need the psychologists to do some analysis on how unfortunate we have all become in our actions and reactions, more reactions than anything, with other people. Like your nutrition program is not your religion. Get over it. If somebody showed me that eating broccoli all day long would make me stronger and leaner than what I'm doing right now, what I do, I mean, like, that's ridiculous. Like, broccoli is worthless, but I'm just coming up with a ridiculous example. Like, if somebody could prove that scientifically, okay, I'm in. They can't, and so I'm not. And so I really try to talk in a way where I'm not one-sided about it. So, like, I encourage like one meal a day, so you get a fasted benefit. The 16-8 thing is just what we used to call skipping breakfast, and that's not going to do much for you. And there's studies on that. It's just not a long enough time without food in your system. Something to keep in mind, like, your body will reach towards stored energy when it's out of food to digest. We all know this. So every time you eat, you put that process on hold. So wouldn't having fewer meals give you a longer period of time where your body is reaching for that fat tissue? Now, obviously, the answer is yes. You'd be a fool to say no. So the question is, like just constantly putting that process on hold. If you eat less, you have less to digest, and it takes less time. If you eat a meal like I eat, like I might have, 2,500 calories in one meal. So it's going to take me longer, but then I have a very long fasted period afterward. So it doesn't really matter. Now, are those two things the same? No, they're not, because there are studies where they would feed people the same amount of calories, two different groups of people. One group throughout the day, the other group, they'd only get it like in one meal. And the people who had the one meal a day, they had better insulin function. They lost body fat. And whereas the other people, they're at a deficit, but their body fat kind of remained similar, like no statistical significance in their loss. So all these things count. And so what I generally favor is, depending on where somebody is and what they want, like focus on long fasted periods. And I think it feels fantastic when you're fasted a couple of days. So I'll go 72 hours with nothing.
Yeah, I'm going to pick your brain on that, just as somebody that I know the evidence is very strong on those long periods of fasting for multitude of reasons, as you said, insulin sensitivity, etc., fat adaptation, all of these things that come with it. But as somebody that has definitely experienced it several times, that one meal a day, not too often, but there was a period for about 12 months where I would try and do it at least once a week, where I would have that, long fast, not quite 72 hours, but I would try and do, 21, 22 hour fast. And I felt amazing. Like, even in that short period, especially with my training load, if I was training for an ultra endurance event and I was already half fasted already from just being in a deficit and a caloric deficit, what advice would you offer to people who are potentially looking to transition to, say, a one meal a day strategy? And the reason I ask that is because it's tricky. It's a tricky change, because we like food. Generally, people enjoy their food, enjoy their meals. We've kind of hardwired breakfast, lunch and dinner, like lots of different, whether they're serving or unserving, depends on the person, of course. But what advice or tips would you offer to somebody who's looking to transition to one meal a day? Or what did you do? I assume it wasn't a one decision, this is what I'm doing. There was a process to it, or maybe it was. What did that look like for you, Dr. J?
I just read a lot of research. All my decisions are based on something I read and research that I want to experiment with. Mostly because if it works or if it doesn't work, I have the evidence to explain. Now, every once in a while, I'll try something and it just doesn't work out like it did in the study. And then I just kind of, I just don't go down that road. Like, or I'll try and figure out what I did maybe wrong.
Is there an example that jumps to mind, just out of curiosity? Anything jump to mind there?
There's a couple of things. Like a few years ago, it was like sucralose was great. But then I knew a lot of people who would have a lot of, Diet Cokes or whatever, or Coke Zero. I don't remember which is the one with sucralose and which is the one with aspartame. They would never get any leaner. And the idea was that the sweetness was going to kill your appetite. No, it actually increases your appetite. So also grows fungus in your intestines, which causes a whole host of other problems. So I just don't, when I read that first round of research, which was funded by people who were producing the artificial sweeteners, it's like I tried it and I watched other people and I'm like, nah, this is, we didn't know it stimulated appetite yet. And when the studies with ghrelin and leptin first came out and looked at the hormones that trigger you to be hungry, well, then there was the answer. And then we understood the mechanism of why these things didn't work so well. So that's one example. But it's like an obvious one now that most people are on board with. You won't meet many people who listen to your podcast that are like, oh yeah, sucralose, it's awesome. Like, nobody's saying that. Though they continue to put it in Red Bull and Bang and all kinds of energy drinks that I see, fitness people reaching for. And then I mention, I'm like, there's sucralose in there, right? And they're like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like, I'll have it anyway kind of job.
Right. Well, I suppose we all justify things when somebody walks up to me in a bar and I'm drinking a martini and they're like, you're Dr. Jaquish, right? And I go, yeah. And they're like, well, why are you drinking alcohol? And I'm like, where did I say I didn't drink alcohol? Like, I like alcohol. It's awesome. Yeah. Also dehydrates you. So, if you have like a photo shoot in the morning, which like, for example, tomorrow morning, I do have a photo shoot. So I will have a vodka or two this evening so I can look nice and sharp for tomorrow.
It's so funny for non-fitness people. I used to compete in bodybuilding shows and I would have brandy or wine the night before and brandy before stage for the same reason, just to dehydrate you. And when you tell non-fitness people, they're like, what? Yeah. To double back into the 1 meal a day, sorry, I was just really curious when you said that you tried something that didn't work for you, and that's a really good one for people in terms of the sucralose and the diet drinks. Transitioning to 1 meal a day, what would you say is a good method for that? Would you recommend people start with 16-8 and then gradually go to 1 meal, or would you offer different advice for people who want to make that transition?
Just go to 1 meal a day. Rip the Band-Aid off. Like, you're not a hero if you do 16-8. That's just a joke. That's like you fell asleep on your flight and you missed breakfast. That's like every day for me. Like, if I wasn't even trying, like, okay, like I'm just busy, like, skip meals. So yeah, just have 1 meal. Just have like a big early dinner. Dinner at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and have a couple of steaks, and then enjoy the rest of your night and go to sleep. It's pretty simple. I there's so much nutrition information that's overcomplicated, and I think when you're not following, when you have a truly low inflammatory diet, you don't need to worry about things like antioxidants, because why would you need an antioxidant when you're not oxidizing? Right? Doesn't make any sense. So people are like, well, you eat oranges, or what kind of fruit do you eat? And I'm like, nothing, none, don't eat it. I don't eat any vegetables either. Pretty much my diet is red meat.
Is it kind of heavy carnivore style, or do you supplement it with other grains and stuff as well? Or is it mostly, I know you've talked about 4 steaks a day and things along those lines. Is it more so towards that carnivore style, or does it vary? It's
more carnivore than anything. Like, I've recently come to the realization that a lot of people don't like to be that strict about their diet. Like I have willpower that's annoying to most other people, but like I just do. Like I'm just laser focused. Like I can go to a banquet and just say I'm fasting and not have anything and watch everybody else eat. I don't care. Doesn't bother me at all. But like I know people who, when they're fasting, if they like smell a pizza place, they're walking down the street, they're like, it's over. They have to eat pizza. So, and I would say that's a large portion of the population. So I've been looking at ways where we can use some supplementation with more efficient proteins, like Fortigen, for example. And, it's made out of bacterial fermentation. It's the most bioavailable protein and, anabolic protein ever created. So I recommend that, and that's be your main source of protein. You're at a massive caloric deficit then, and you're fasting. And then when it comes to your one meal, maybe you don't have to be so strict about it. Because like just eating steak every day, that doesn't get boring to me, but that does to some other people. So like just as an experiment, there was a girl I was dating a couple months ago that had absolutely no self-control. And so I tried to figure out like, what can I do with this person so that she doesn't feel like she's being deprived, but still gets the benefits. And so that's sort of what I'm actually filming a whole bunch of video about it tomorrow. That'll be more interesting because like ultimately, and my good friend Kyle Zagrodsky says this all the time. He's the CEO of OsteoStrong. He says like, what's the best diet? And it sounds like a joke. I'm like, I don't know, man, what? And he says, the one people will follow. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I think you're right about that. Because if they don't follow it, it's not doing shit. Yeah, like I'm really trying to help people get to something they can stick with and maybe even enjoy. Because like right now, like strict ketogenic nutrition, which is a term I hate, by the way, because there's no such thing as ketogenic nutrition. Ketogenesis is a process of the body, period. It's not a food source. I find it to be just a complete misuse of the term. Yeah. Anyway.
It's what confuses people as well. I think that's
Well, it does, because they think if they're, quote, eating keto, they can eat whatever they want and they'll put a stick of butter on everything. And it's like, no, you will become fat if you do that. That's not a thing. You need to encourage the body to not become dependent again on glucose, but you need to focus on also those periods of time where you're just not digesting any calories, because that's when the body's looking to metabolize body fat. It's in the absence of calories. So if you just keep on eating butter all day long, like a lot of ketogenic gurus will tell you, you're going to be worse off.
Definitely when it comes to fat loss, 100%, as you said there. What I definitely heard you say, which I love, is when it comes to nutrition, it's very much about finding what's going to be a good fit for you. What diet is the best one, the one you're going to follow. And I think there'll be a handful of people, even more so, maybe a percentage, you'll go, okay, 1 meal a day, I'm going to give that a go, or I'm going to stick with mostly red meat. Like I've had so many people I've worked with over the years who hate broccoli and greens, and like I think what you said there was probably music to their ears, and they're like, oh, Dr. J doesn't eat broccoli either. So you might have a few people that will jump on board with that. Dr. J, I really enjoyed this conversation. Really enjoyed the book in particular. As I said, it got me questioning some of my own kind of held beliefs that I just hadn't really been challenged, particularly the muscle confusion theory and a few others. I just have one final question before we kind of give a call to send people over your way to X3 over to the website. But you're doing so many things right now between, I know with COVID, it's obviously you're not going to be able to go around and do as many in-person events that you would normally be doing, but between your inventing and the social media presence you have, over 1 million followers on Instagram, and you're putting up a video series, doing a photo shoot tomorrow, etc. What's the single most thing that you are the most excited about right now? And that might be in your personal life, might be when it comes to the research or the evidence that you're currently looking into when it comes to training or nutrition, or it might be something completely different. But what are you currently most excited about?
I wish I could tell you. I'm working on something that's a real breakthrough. It's a new thing, and it's gonna be awesome. But it may be more than a year before it comes out. There's a number of things I'm working on, but there is one thing that will have, I believe, just about every piece of fitness equipment thrown in, melted down and turned into, staples.
Oh, I'm interested. I was like, you've given me the Tony Robbins hook. I was like, now I want to know. But definitely,
gyms will be history, in a day. Already, you look at X3, but there is a way that we can. So, I'm frequently accused of having a cult following, because the people that put on 20 pounds of muscle with X3, and they've been training for 15 years before that, and they only put on 5 pounds, they think I'm pretty clever. And so they're very excited about what I'm working on. So they've seen benefits, but what if I could really get into people's minds what is happening physiologically to their body? It has more to do with why are diagnostics in medicine? Why do diagnostics drive more revenue, especially in your country, drive more revenue than treatments? I mean, the NHS is they'll pay an arm and a leg for diagnostics, and then the treatments are well, I don't know. You should probably go to private pay doctors for that. And I worked with the NHS on my study. The NHS is better than the United States on getting things done, and still they have the same problem. People want, and I'll tell you, it's not any government problem. It's an attitude that people want to know what's going on more than they want to fix it. So when a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, who's dying, understands their hemoglobin A1C score, and they know all they have to do is just eat, maybe half the Twinkies that they were eating before, and they can affect that score, they tend to do it. And then they change their score, and they're proud of themselves. Now, they may not continue to go down that road, but if I can give everyone who uses the technology a real way to see what is happening inside of their body, I'm telling you, all other fitness equipment will be viewed as trash.
Such exciting times. I was we'll definitely have to do a talk on that in a year's time, or whenever that kind of is out.
Oh, when it comes out, let's do this again.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. 100%. Dr. J, I've loved this conversation. As I said, I've been dying to talk since we set up this interview. For everybody that's listening who is interested in learning more about X3, learning more about you, picking up the book, where's the best place for them to get you? Through the website? Is it through Instagram? Is it the book anywhere online?
I created a landing page where you can find X3, the book, the optimized protein, everything. And I did not put my last name in that URL for a reason, because my last name's hard. So it's just drj.com, DOCTOR, the letter J.com.
And for everybody listening, I will link that landing page in the show notes on bryankeenfitness.com, and everywhere you are listening to podcasts, in Spotify and iTunes, on Stitcher. Just click straight on through. Go check out Dr. J's stuff. Thank you so much again for your time. I know how busy you are, so I'm absolutely delighted we got to do this, and I look forward to a round 2. Dr. J, thank you again.
Brian, thanks so much.
There you have it, Dr. J, on why cardio does not work for fat loss, the reason weightlifting is a waste of time, and the benefits of variable resistance training. So hopefully this was a very eye-opening episode, a nice one to bring in some different perspectives on how you can potentially approach your training, potentially approach your nutrition, and ultimately find what's going to be a good fit for you. As always, if you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to leave me a rating, leave a review, or if you like emails and you like to get my feedback or my own thoughts on each episode, Every Thursday, I send out a 3-email takeaway on my top 3 takeaways from the podcast I've recorded. So if you want to know what were the major things that I got from today's episode with Dr. J, just head over to briankeenfitness.com, scroll down to the newsletter at the bottom of the homepage, pop your email in there, and every Thursday at lunchtime, I'll send you my top 3 takeaways from today's podcast. That's everything from today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed. Catch you all next Monday.